Scout wasn't my first pet, but he was the one who felt like a soulmate. He was a wiry, scruffy terrier with a patch over one eye and a personality 10 times bigger than his little body. He'd been abandoned when I found him at the shelter, but the second he trotted over and nudged my hand with his nose, I knew he was coming home with me. Scout had been by my side for 14 years, through heartbreaks, new jobs, moves across the city, and finally settling down with my partner, Maya. He wasn't just a dog, he was family. When he started limping a few months ago, I figured it was just his arthritis acting up. He'd been slowing down for a while after all, but when he started refusing his food and seemed to have trouble even lying down comfortably, I knew it was more than age catching up with him. The vet confirmed my fears. Scout had a tumor on his liver. "It's aggressive," she said, looking at me with sympathy. "We could consider surgery, but it's invasive and would mean a difficult recovery." "How long would he have without surgery?" I asked, already feeling my heart breaking. "Maybe 3 to 6 months," she said gently. "With surgery, he might have a year, maybe more, but it would be a tough road." I looked over at Scout, who was lying on the exam table, his eyes half closed but trusting as always. I wanted to believe he could handle anything, that he was as tough as he'd always been. But then again, he was 14, and I wasn't sure what putting him through surgery and recovery would mean for his last days. When we got home, Maya looked at me, her face full of compassion and worry. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked gently. "I know you love him, but surgery, chemo, that's going to be so hard on him." I shook my head, trying to hold back the tears. "I just don't know if I can let go. He's been with me through everything. I can't just give up on him." She nodded, her hand on my shoulder. "I know he's been your rock, but sometimes maybe loving him means letting him rest. I don't want his last days to be nothing but pain and confusion." I knew she was trying to help me see the reality, but it felt like she was asking me to give up on him too easily. "He's always been a fighter, Maya," I said, my voice breaking. "He deserves a chance." For the next few days, we barely talked about it, each of us dancing around the subject, trying to see things from each other's side. I poured myself into reading stories about older dogs who had beaten the odds, holding on to any hope I could find. Every success story felt like proof that he could make it, that this wasn't the end if we just gave him a shot. Maya would listen as I talked about the possibilities, but I could see the sadness in her eyes, the way she'd look at Scout like she was already preparing to say goodbye. She would tell me, gently, that there was a difference between a good life and a longer life, that sometimes we hold on for ourselves rather than for them. One night, after another round of research and back-and-forth conversations, she sat beside me and held my hand. "Let's talk to the vet again," she said softly. "Maybe we need to hear what all of this will really mean, so we're making the decision for him, not for us." The vet was patient, answering all of our questions, explaining what Scout's recovery might look like if we went through with the surgery. She didn't sugarcoat it. "There's a chance he could have some good time afterwards," she said. "But with a tumor this advanced, the surgery itself is risky, and recovery is hard, especially for older dogs. He may not understand why he's hurting or why he's weak." Maya's hand tightened around mine as the vet's words sank in. When we got home, I sat beside Scout, scratching behind his ears, trying to understand what he'd want if he could tell me. He looked up at me with those trusting eyes, and I felt the weight of his love and loyalty, the way he'd always given me everything he had, no questions asked. And in that moment, I realized I might be holding on to him for me, not for him. That night, I finally told Maya I was ready to let him go. She wrapped her arms around me, holding me as I cried, telling me I was brave, that this was the kindest thing I could do for him. Together, we made his last week as special as we could, giving him his favorite treats, taking him to his favorite park, letting him sleep in bed with us every night. On the day we said goodbye, the vet came to our home, and I held Scout close, whispering to him that he'd been the best friend, the best family I could have ever asked for. He drifted off peacefully, his head in my lap, and even though I knew he was finally at peace, the silence that followed felt unbearable. Now, every time I come home, I expect to see him there, waiting for me by the door, his tail wagging. Every quiet moment feels like it's missing something. I know, deep down, that letting him go was the right choice, that he's no longer suffering. But there's still a part of me that wonders if I gave up too soon, if maybe I should have fought harder for him. So I'm here, asking AITA for letting him go instead of fighting until the very... All right, here it is. My boyfriend, Jake, and I are officially a month away from moving in together, and I'm starting to feel like we might need a relationship counselor just to survive this move. We both agreed that moving in was the right next step, and I've been super excited about it until we actually started planning. Or rather, I started planning, and he decided that planning was completely unnecessary. To set the scene, I'm a bit of a planning enthusiast. I like knowing what's coming and being prepared. I've got spreadsheets with moving company options, a budget breakdown, a timeline for when to start packing each room. Basically a foolproof roadmap to a stress-free move. In my mind, if we get everything set up now, we can walk into moving day with a calm, confident vibe, knowing we've got everything under control. Jake, on the other hand, thinks all of this is hilarious. He's the kind of person who will just toss a bunch of clothes in a duffel bag 5 minutes before leaving for a weekend trip. So when I showed him my moving timeline, expecting maybe a little bit of gratitude, he just chuckled. "Wow, babe, did you make a whole presentation for this?" he said, smiling at me like I was some overeager intern. "Yes, actually," I replied, trying to keep it light. "This way, we won't have to worry about forgetting anything. We could just go down the list and have everything set." He looked at me amused. "Or we could just pack up a few things each week and figure it out as we go. Why make it more complicated than it has to be?" I couldn't believe it. Jake, moving is already complicated. Planning now will make it less complicated. But he just waved me off. "You're stressing about it for no reason. It's not like we're moving across the country. Let's just take it easy and handle things when we get closer." And just like that, I could feel a mountain of anxiety building in me. I tried to explain that my planning wasn't about stress. It was about avoiding it. But every time I brought up something logistical, like hiring movers early or setting up our internet in advance, he would just shrug and say, "We'll get to it," like we had all the time in the world. Finally, I thought, okay, maybe I could meet him halfway. I suggested that I'd handle the technical side of things, like booking movers and organizing packing, if he wanted to take care of the creative side, like figuring out where things should go and picking out any new furniture we'd need. I thought this would let me be organized without making him feel like he was being micromanaged. But he just rolled his eyes. "I don't want to be boxed into decorating duty," he said. "This is a big step for us, not some corporate project. Let's just do it together, but without all the planning." That's where things really started to unravel. To me, moving without a plan was basically inviting chaos into our lives. But to him, my planning was sucking the fun out of something he thought should be spontaneous. He kept saying that we didn't need to overthink every little thing, that moving was supposed to be messy, and that we'd just figure it out along the way. Then last week, things came to a head. I'd found a great moving company that had good reviews and a reasonable price, and I wanted to book them ASAP so we wouldn't lose the spot. I thought he'd be glad that I was taking initiative, but instead, he just shook his head. "Why are we booking this so early?" "We've got time," he said, sounding genuinely baffled. "Jake," I said, struggling to keep my cool, "if we wait, we might end up without any decent options, or we'll have to pay way more. This way, we're set, and it's one less thing to worry about." He just shrugged again. "We don't need to turn this into a massive project. If we're paying movers, they'll take care of it. And if we can't find any, we'll rent a truck. It's not the end of the world." I could feel myself getting frustrated. But if we don't organize it now, moving day is going to be a nightmare. We'll end up overwhelmed and stressed because we didn't plan anything. He gave me a look like I was overreacting. "I just don't think we need to be this uptight. Moving's always chaotic, but it doesn't have to be this intense." That word, intense, really hit a nerve, because to me, this wasn't about being intense. It was about making things easier on both of us. But he seemed to think my need to plan was actually causing more stress, like I was actively choosing to turn something simple into a big deal. Since then, we've been in this weird limbo. I'm trying to respect his desire to take it easy, but every time I picture moving day without a solid plan, my anxiety spikes. Meanwhile, he's trying to humor me by packing a few boxes here and there, but I can tell he still thinks I'm blowing this way out of proportion. The other day, he even joked, "With the way you're planning, you'd think we were moving to another country," which didn't exactly feel supportive. I know he's trying to keep things relaxed, and I'm genuinely trying to go with his flow, but it feels like we're both silently annoyed with each other's approach. I'll suggest we set aside a few hours to go through our stuff and sort out what we're keeping, and he'll roll his eyes and say, "Let's just pack what we need when we get there." I feel like I'm the only one trying to avoid a last-minute mess, while he thinks I'm turning a simple move into a whole production. Now, I'm honestly starting to question myself. Am I making this more stressful than it has to be? Should I just trust his go-with-the-flow approach and hope for the best? Or is he being way too relaxed for something this big? My mom has always been the type to do everything for everyone else without ever taking time for herself. For as long as I can remember, she's been the family fixer, organizing holidays, keeping up with everyone's schedules, helping out anyone who needs it, and working long hours at her job. Lately, though, she seemed exhausted. She still tries to keep up appearances, but I can see it's taking a toll on her. I've told her to take a break, but she always brushes it off, saying, "Oh, I'll relax when things calm down." But they never do. So, I took matters into my own hands and decided to treat her to a surprise spa day. I booked a full day of massages, facials, and a lunch reservation at this fancy spa a few towns over. I even cleared her schedule with my dad and made sure my siblings would handle everything for the day. I wanted her to have a day where she didn't have to lift a finger or worry about anyone else. Just a day to finally focus on herself. On the day of the surprise, I showed up at her house early in the morning with the spa itinerary, all excited, ready to whisk her away. I walked in, handed her the schedule, and said, "Mom, today's all about you. I've got everything set up, massages, facials, the works. You don't have to worry about a thing. Let's go." She looked down at the schedule, and instead of the joyful reaction I was expecting, her face fell. "You planned this whole thing? Without even asking me?" I laughed, thinking she was just surprised. "Yes, it's all ready to go. You don't have to think about anything. Just a day of total relaxation, something you deserve." But instead of getting excited, she seemed uncomfortable. "I don't know, honey. I had a lot planned for today. Errands, groceries. And what about your grandma? I promised to check on her this afternoon." I tried to reassure her. "Everything's covered, Mom. Dad and the others are taking care of the house, and I already talked to Grandma. She knows you're busy. Today's about you for once, not everyone else." She sighed and gave me this weary look. "I get that you're trying to help, but it feels like you just decided for me, like you didn't consider that I might actually want to get some things done. Relaxing is nice, but it doesn't make the responsibilities go away." I was taken aback. "But Mom, you're always saying you're tired. You never take a break. I thought you'd be thrilled to have a day where you didn't have to worry about anyone else." She shook her head, looking frustrated. "It's not that simple. You might think a spa day would fix everything, but life doesn't stop just because I'm sitting in a massage chair. You can't just fix things by booking a day off for me. It feels like you're trying to make me fit into your idea of what I need instead of asking what would actually help." Her words hit me hard. I'd thought I was doing something nice, something she'd appreciate, but she was making it sound like I was selfish, like I didn't understand her at all. "I just wanted you to know how much you're appreciated. I see how much you do, and I wanted to give you something that's just for you." She softened a bit, but still looked sad. "I know you meant well, and I'm grateful, but it would have meant more if you just asked. Right now, taking a day to relax feels like a luxury I can't afford, and you assuming I could, it makes me feel like you don't really get what I'm going through." I didn't know what to say. I'd poured so much thought and effort into this, all with the hope of making her happy. But somehow, it had turned into a reminder that I didn't understand her at all. I felt embarrassed and disappointed, standing there holding a day that now felt pointless. In the end, I told her I understood, gave her the spa voucher to use when she wanted, and left feeling like I'd totally missed the mark. Now, I can't help but wonder if I was wrong to just plan everything without asking. I thought I was showing love, but maybe I just made her feel like her needs were invisible. AITA? This all started with my cousin's graduation. Now, I should mention my cousin and I have never been especially close. We see each other at family events, chat a bit, but we're not exactly best friends. My family, though, is the type that treats every milestone like a massive event, and they expect everyone to drop everything to be there. I get it, graduating college is a big deal, But between work, my own commitments, and the travel involved, I just didn't feel like making a huge fuss over it. My mom called me weeks in advance to let me know the details, and it was pretty clear that she was expecting me to show up. She went on about how the whole family would be there, and how it would mean so much to my cousin. I told her I'd think about it, but that it might be tough with my schedule. In reality, I just wasn't up for the whole production. I've been swamped at work, and the idea of a weekend of forced small talk with extended family wasn't my idea of fun. Plus, I'd already made plans to catch up with some friends that weekend, and honestly, I didn't want to cancel them. When the graduation day got closer, my mom started getting pushier, saying things like, "Your cousin only graduates once, and everyone is expecting you to be there." I finally told her I wouldn't be able to make it. I figured it was better to be upfront than to bail last minute. She immediately tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was being selfish and that I should support family. She threw in a whole speech about how our family has always been close and that I was letting everyone down. I told her that I had other plans, and that while I was happy for my cousin, I didn't feel like I had to be there in person to show my support. My mom was clearly not happy, but she let it go, or so I thought. I sent my cousin a card and a small gift, figuring that would be enough. I mean, people skip events all the time, right? It's not like I was the only family member in the world who couldn't attend a graduation. Then the day of the graduation arrived. I kept my phone off most of the day, knowing my mom would probably call to remind me of what I was missing. I ended up going out with my friends, just like I'd planned, and had a great time. When I turned my phone on later, there were texts from my mom, my aunts, and even my cousin. My mom's message was short and cutting. "Hope you had a great time doing whatever was more important than family." My cousin's message was surprisingly long, saying she'd been hurt by my lack of support and how everyone had noticed my absence. She mentioned that other relatives were asking where I was and that she'd had to awkwardly explain I couldn't be bothered to show up. Apparently, my mom had let it slip to the family that I'd had other plans, which I'm sure she made sound much worse than it was. Now, everyone thinks I blew off the graduation for something trivial. My aunt even texted me saying that I'd been thoughtless and that family gatherings were obligations, not options. They've all decided I'm some heartless, selfish person for not being there for a day. Since then, the family group chat has been full of not-so-subtle comments about supporting each other and being there when it counts. My mom has been especially frosty, barely speaking to me and dropping passive-aggressive hints whenever we do talk. She keeps saying things like, "I just hope you're happy with your choices, and it's sad when people don't appreciate the importance of family." I get that maybe I could have gone, but it just didn't seem like a big deal to me. I congratulated my cousin, sent her a gift, and thought that was enough. I'm starting to wonder if they're all overreacting, or if I'm just missing something here. Am I really the bad guy for not wanting to rearrange my whole life for every family event? So, I can't seem to let this go, no matter how much I tell myself to move on. Every time I think I've processed it, I find myself back at square one, replaying it all, wondering how I ended up here, estranged from my cousin over what I convinced myself was just a dinner. The truth is, I know why I didn't go. I know exactly what was going through my mind when I got that invitation. I remember rolling my eyes, thinking another celebration? I thought, why make such a big deal over something he'd been planning his whole life to do anyway? Passing the bar was important, but it was also what everyone expected of Danny, wasn't it? And honestly, it was what he expected of himself. So I just brushed it off, assuming he'd feel the same. I kept telling myself that it was fine, that he wouldn't take it personally, that he didn't need me there. But now, it's hitting me that this wasn't about what I thought of his achievements. It was about what he needed. He'd done this incredible thing, something that took years of grinding away, and he wanted to share that victory with the people he cared about. And instead of being part of it, I turned it into something trivial because it didn't fit into my life, my plans. I realize now how selfish that was. I didn't even consider what it meant to him to invite me, to want me there. I was so focused on myself that I didn't see the simplest thing, that showing up wasn't about understanding his career or his milestones. It was just about being there for him. The worst part is, I see now how many times he's been there for me without a second thought. When I was struggling in college, it was Danny who'd sit with me in the library until midnight, going over my notes, even though he had his own exams to worry about. When I was at my first job, hating every second of it, Danny was the one who kept encouraging me to keep going, telling me that I'd find my way eventually. And when I finally did switch jobs, he came to celebrate with me, even though I know he had other plans. Danny had this quiet loyalty that I just took for granted, thinking it would always be there like the constant hum of background music. Now, I'm wondering if I misread him all along. I saw him as the strong one, the one who didn't need anyone, who just powered through everything on his own. I assumed he'd always be fine, always forgive, always let things slide. But I realize now that even strong people want their people to show up for them. Even the most independent people still need a little recognition, a little acknowledgement from those they care about. Since that night, everything feels different. Danny hasn't reached out to me since, and his silence says everything. I keep thinking he'll text me, that we'll eventually fall back into our usual banter. But it's been months, and I'm starting to accept that maybe I've done something I can't just fix. I made him feel like he didn't matter to me, like his success wasn't important enough for me to make time. And that's not something you can just apologize for and move on. I've tried to explain it to myself in so many ways, that I was busy, that he was overreacting, that one dinner doesn't define our relationship. But every time I try to justify it, I end up right back where I started, realizing that none of those excuses changed the fact that he needed me there, and I let him down. I think the hardest part of this is realizing that this wasn't just one choice. It's a pattern. I've been putting my own comfort and my own priorities above everyone else's for years, assuming they'd understand, assuming they'd just accept that this is who I am. And maybe that's the core of it. I've been treating people's big moments like optional events, like things that only matter if they don't inconvenience me. But I'm starting to see that real relationships don't work that way. Sometimes, you have to put someone else's needs before your own. I want to reach out to him to tell him that I get it now, that I'm sorry for not showing up, that I see what that night meant to him. But I keep stopping myself because I don't want to come across as trying to make myself feel better. This isn't something I can just explain away with a text. He gave me a chance to show up for him, to be part of something he'd worked his whole life for, and I failed him. Now I have to live with the fact that I might never be that person to him again. It's painful sitting with this regret, but maybe that's what I need. Maybe I need to feel this so I can finally change, so I stop making these small, selfish choices that end up hurting people who actually care about me. So here I am, wrestling with this question that won't go away. AITA for not showing up for my cousin when he needed me most? Or did I just underestimate the importance of being there for people in ways I didn't understand until it was too late? Alright, here's what happened at my sister Sarah's housewarming party. I thought I was being a supportive, realistic sibling, but somehow it's become this whole issue, and now I'm the bad guy in the family. Sarah and her husband, Jake, just bought their first home together. They've been saving up for a while, and it's a beautiful place, I'll admit. Huge backyard, nice open kitchen, tons of light. They're really excited, and it's a big deal, especially since they were renting a small apartment before this. So they threw a housewarming party, invited family and friends, and the whole vibe was very we did it. When I got there, everyone was already fawning over the place, telling Sarah how amazing the house was, how lucky they were to get it, how everything looked just perfect. People were going on about how the place was such a step up and how it was a dream come true. Don't get me wrong, I was happy for her. But the truth is, they bought in a great market, and Jake's parents helped with a big chunk of the down payment. So while it's awesome that they got the house, it's not exactly like they pulled this off all on their own. At one point, while Sarah was showing me around the kitchen, she was talking about how stressful the whole process was and how hard they'd worked to save up for this place. I couldn't help but say, yeah, it's great that you guys saved up, but it's also amazing to have a little help. Not everyone's lucky enough to have that kind of support. I thought it was a friendly comment, just acknowledging the reality of their situation, but Sarah kind of laughed it off awkwardly and moved on, talking about their plans to repaint the dining room. Later on, Jake was telling a group of us about the journey of homeownership and how they'd spent years planning for this. He was really proud, talking about how they'd finally achieved their dream and how it was all worth it. I chimed in with, I totally get it. It's amazing to have your own place. But buying a house is definitely easier with family support. I've been saving for years and still have a ways to go, so it's awesome that you guys had that help. Jake just kind of smiled and said, "Yeah, we're very grateful," but a couple of people in the group gave me looks. I brushed it off because, I mean, come on. Am I supposed to pretend they did this totally alone? When the tour moved upstairs, people were marveling over their bedroom and the big en-suite bathroom. Someone joked, "Wow, it's like something out of a magazine," and everyone started complimenting them again, going on about how perfect the place was. I thought I'd join in with a little dose of reality and said, "It really is gorgeous. Just be ready for the maintenance costs, though. Owning a home comes with so many unexpected expenses, right?" I remember when I rented a bigger place, the heating bills alone were insane. Welcome to the joys of homeownership. I laughed, thinking I was being helpful, but Sarah looked at me with this half-annoyed, half-confused expression and quickly moved on to the next room. The night went on, and I kept hearing people talking about how incredible it was that Sarah and Jake had achieved this milestone, as if they'd climbed Everest. After a while, I got a bit tired of the exaggeration. So when I was talking to my cousin Emma, I said, "Look, I'm happy for them, but let's be real. It's not like they bought this place 100% on their own. I just don't get why everyone's acting like they performed some miracle here." Emma frowned and said, "It's their moment. Can't we just let them enjoy it?" I shrugged and said, "Sure, but a little perspective doesn't hurt." After that, I tried to just stay in the background and let everyone have their wow moment. But then during the final toast, Sarah's best friend raised her glass and started saying how Sarah and Jake were the perfect example of what hard work can achieve, and how they should be so proud of themselves for building this life. I couldn't help myself. I laughed a little, maybe louder than I meant to, and said, "Well, it's great when hard work meets a good market and family support, right?" There was a bit of awkward silence before people clinked their glasses, and I noticed Sarah shooting me a look. The next day, Sarah texted me, saying that my comments felt like I was downplaying their accomplishment, and she was hurt that I didn't just let them have their moment. She said it made her feel like I thought they didn't deserve the house. I told her that wasn't my intention at all. I was just being honest and realistic. I mean, yes, they did work hard, but it's also true that they had help, and there's nothing wrong with that. I figured they'd be okay with a little honesty. She replied, "Sometimes people just want to celebrate without hearing the reality check." I tried to explain that I thought it was important to acknowledge the full picture and that I was just trying to keep things real, not undermine her. But she didn't seem to get it and just kept saying she wished I'd been more supportive. Now, my mom's also hinted that maybe I was a little harsh, saying it wouldn't have hurt to be more positive. But am I really supposed to ignore reality just to stroke their egos? AITA for giving them a reality check? My coworker Alex and I have always had a playful rivalry. We're both competitive, and that's led to some good-natured pranks over the years. But it was all harmless, at least until recently. It started when Alex left his phone unlocked at his desk. I couldn't resist. I grabbed it and changed his wallpaper to a ridiculous meme of a cat in a superhero cape with "I am a Mio-tastic hero" in giant glittery font. I thought he'd find it funny and just change it back, but when he came back and saw it, he shook his head and muttered, "You're asking for it." The next morning, I came into work to find that every single one of my desktop icons had been moved to random spots across the screen, some hidden behind other windows, others in the corners. I spent 10 minutes sorting through them, realizing he'd made me waste time as payback. I laughed it off, but shot him a look, letting him know the game was on. For my next move, I ordered a batch of googly eyes and stuck them on every object on his desk. His monitor, stapler, water bottle, phone charger, everything was watching him. He rolled his eyes when he saw it, but I could tell he was fighting a smile. But then Alex turned it up a notch. When I went to get coffee later that day, I came back to find that my entire mouse had been covered in clear tape. I kept clicking and moving it, wondering why it wouldn't work until I finally noticed the tape. By then, Alex was laughing at my confusion from his desk. "Thought you were a tech genius?" he smirked. "All right, if you wanted to get fancy, I could play that game too." The next day, I filled his desk drawer with packing peanuts. When he opened it, they spilled everywhere, and he had to spend a good chunk of his morning picking them up. I was ready to call it even after that, but Alex clearly wasn't done. The next morning, I opened my laptop only to find that every letter key had been switched around. It was chaos. My keyboard was an indecipherable mess of scrambled letters, and I couldn't type a single sentence without hitting random keys. It took me almost an hour to reassemble my keyboard, and by the end, I was frustrated enough to want revenge. So, I went for the classic. I printed a giant missing pet poster with Alex's photo on it and plastered it all over the office. Underneath his picture, I wrote, "Lost. Answers to Alex or Prank King. If found, please return a desk by 5 p.m. The whole office was laughing, and by lunch, I could tell he was getting annoyed. But instead of talking to me about it, he decided to go big. I mean, really big. I came back from lunch to find my entire desk encased in plastic wrap. My chair, my computer, my keyboard, everything was tightly bound in layers and layers of cling film. It took me nearly an hour to unwrap it all, and my boss wasn't thrilled with the mess I made in the process. Alex just shrugged when I looked at him. "All in good fun, right?" he said, barely containing his grin. By now, I was ready to end it, but I couldn't back down without one last move. So, I decided to make it memorable. I ordered a dozen alarm clocks, set each one for different times throughout the day, and hid them all over his cubicle. Some behind books, one in the ceiling tiles, one under his desk. I figured he'd find them all by the afternoon. The first alarm went off at 10 a.m., and he started searching for it, looking annoyed but amused. But as the day went on and more alarms kept going off, he started to look genuinely irritated. By the time he found the last one at 3 p.m., he was fuming. I thought it was over, but Alex wasn't done. The next morning, I came in to find my entire computer in safe mode with my desktop wallpaper replaced by a giant text reading, "Time to quit while you're ahead." Alex had somehow gotten into my settings and locked me out of most of my files. It took a call to IT to get my computer back in working order, and by the end of the day, I was exhausted, embarrassed, and annoyed. But I couldn't resist. So, I got one of those fake urgent transfer request forms from HR, filled it out with Alex's name, and left it on our boss's desk with a sticky note that said, "Approved." I thought it would just give our boss a laugh, but he actually thought it was real and called Alex in to discuss his transfer. Alex was totally blindsided, stammering about how he hadn't put in a request, and our boss, realizing it was a prank, looked like he was on the verge of strangling both of us. That was it. Our boss sat us down for a serious talk and told us in no uncertain terms to knock it off or face disciplinary action. We both agreed to stop, feeling a little ashamed, but mostly just exhausted. The prank war was over. Things have been tense between us ever since. Alex and I barely talk now, and the vibe in the office is weird. We both went too far, and I think we both know it. But looking back, I can't help but wonder if I really pushed him too much or if he was just a sore loser. So, when my best friend Kate called me one night with big news, I could tell from her voice that this was going to be something major. We'd been inseparable since high school, through college, and all the years since, so whatever she wanted to tell me, I was ready to celebrate with her. "Guess what?" she said, barely able to contain her excitement. "I just got an offer on my dream house. It's a fixer-upper, but it's perfect. And I was hoping you'd move in with me. We can do it together, make it our place. Just like we always talked about." There was a time when I would have jumped at this. Back in college, we'd always dreamed about getting a place together, a house we'd make into a home, and we'd talk for hours about how it would look. But we'd grown up since then. I had a steady job now, a small but cozy apartment, and my own routines. And even though I love Kate like family, I wasn't sure that moving in with her was still what I wanted. "Kate," I said, feeling the weight of my hesitation, "that sounds amazing, but are you sure about this? I mean, moving in together is a big deal. I know we've always talked about it, but things are different now. We've both got our own lives." She paused, and I could almost hear her disappointment over the phone. "Of course I'm sure," she said, her voice softening. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't. We'd be helping each other out, just like we always have. And it's not like you'd be living with a stranger. It'd be us, our place. We'd have so much fun." I swallowed, my mind racing with all the things I didn't know how to say. I love Kate, but I also loved my independence. I had my own space, my own habits, my own way of doing things. Living with her, someone who was spontaneous, a little messy, and always ready to socialize, felt like it would disrupt the balance I'd worked so hard to find. "Kate, I don't know if I'm ready for that," I said gently. "I'm settled here, and I'm finally in a place where everything feels stable. I don't know if I want to give that up." She was quiet for a long time, and I could feel the hurt building between us. "Stable," she finally said, her voice a mixture of confusion and sadness. "Is that really what it's about? We're talking about a dream we've had for years, and now, because you're comfortable, you're just saying no?" I felt a pang of guilt. I knew what this meant to her, how long she'd waited for a place she could call her own. But I couldn't ignore the part of me that had grown into my own space, that had become used to a life of my own making. Moving in with her now felt like stepping backward, like giving up something I'd fought so hard to build. "It's not just about comfort," I said softly. "It's about having my own space, my own life. I love you, Kate, and I'm so proud of you for getting this house. But I think we're in different places now." She let out a shaky breath. "I thought you'd be excited. I thought you want to do this with me. This was supposed to be our thing. I can't believe you're just backing out." The disappointment in her voice hit me hard. "I'm not backing out," I said, my own voice tinged with sadness. I'm moving forward, I guess. My life is here, in my own place. I don't want to mess that up. And I don't want to ruin what we have by forcing something that doesn't feel right anymore." There was a long silence, and I could feel the tension settling between us. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "So, that's it? After everything we've talked about? You're just saying no?" "I'm sorry," I whispered, my heart heavy. "I wish I could give you the answer you want, but I don't think moving in together is what I want anymore." She didn't respond, and the silence stretched out, thick and heavy. I knew this wasn't what she'd expected, that she'd imagined us laughing together as we painted walls, picking out furniture, making memories. And the truth was, I'd pictured it too, just years ago in a life that felt far away now. We hung up that night with polite goodbyes, but I could feel the fracture, the shift in our friendship, like a weight pressing down on me. I wanted to call her back, to tell her I'd changed my mind, that I'd pack my bags and help her turn that fixer-upper into our shared dream. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't. Over the next few weeks, things between us grew strained. She'd send texts with house updates, paint colors, new furniture, ideas for a future garden. I'd reply, enthusiastic but guarded, always careful not to step too close. And every time I felt the distance widening. One day, she called to tell me she'd asked someone else, another friend, to move in. I could hear the hurt in her voice, even as she tried to sound upbeat. "It'll be different," she said, her tone a mix of hope and sadness. "But it'll still be good." I congratulated her, my heart heavy, feeling a strange ache that I couldn't place. I'd wanted her to find someone who could share her excitement. But hearing it made the distance between us feel even more real, like a bridge I'd burned without meaning to. As time went on, our friendship didn't exactly fall apart, but it faded, becoming polite exchanges and occasional visits. The easy, carefree bond we'd once shared felt fractured, and no amount of texts or visits seemed to fix it. I'd held on to my independence, my space, but at the cost of something that had once meant everything to me. And now, sitting here in my quiet apartment, I can't help but wonder if I made the wrong choice, if I should have been willing to give up a little comfort for the chance to keep something far more valuable. All right, here's the story of how a quick loan to my friend Sarah turned into this huge mess that's put our friendship on the rocks. Sarah and I have been best friends since high school. She's always been the life of the party, and she has a way of making you feel like you're the most important person in the room. So, when she called me up a few months ago, stressed and in a bind, I didn't think twice. She needed $750 to cover some bills after her hours got cut at work. She promised it'd be just a few weeks until she got paid, and she'd get it back to me right away. I trusted her completely. She's been my rock through a lot, so it felt like a no-brainer to help her out. I transferred her the money, and she thanked me 100 times over. But a few weeks turned into a month, and there was no sign of the money coming back. At first, I didn't want to be that friend who pressures someone going through a tough time, so I let it go. But as another month passed, I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. Sarah was posting pictures at new restaurants, talking about buying concert tickets, and even sharing a treat-yourself shopping haul online. Meanwhile, I was tightening my own budget, waiting for her to make a move on repaying the loan. After 2 months, I sent her a friendly text saying, "Hey, any idea when you'll be able to start paying me back?" things are a bit tight on my end." She replied with a long message about how things were still a bit crazy, and she was so grateful for my patience. She ended with, "I promise I'll get it to you soon." But there was no actual timeline in sight. I didn't want to press, so I figured I'd wait it out a little longer. Then, a few weeks later, Sarah threw a big get-together at her place. She decorated the whole place with new stuff, had ordered catering, and was raving about a fancy new blender she bought. Everyone was complimenting her, and she was saying, "Sometimes you just gotta splurge, you know?" The whole time, I couldn't shake this feeling that my loan was funding her little splurges. Toward the end of the night, I finally pulled her aside and, as gently as I could, said, "Hey Sarah, I'm really happy for you, but I could really use some of that loan back soon. Maybe you could start with a small amount." She immediately looked hurt and a little annoyed. "Really? You're bringing this up at my party?" She gave a small, awkward laugh and said, "I thought you were a friend who understood what I'm going through." I told her I totally understood that things were tough, but it had been months, and I was starting to feel like she was prioritizing everything else over paying me back. She sighed dramatically and said, "I just needed to feel good about life for once. I can't believe you're stressing me out over this." I was taken aback. I wasn't trying to stress her out. I just felt like I had a right to ask about the money at this point. She ended up saying something like, "If this is such a big deal to you, maybe I shouldn't have asked you in the first place," and walked away. Since that night, things have been icy between us. She's been distant, and I hear from mutual friends that she thinks I'm being petty and making her feel guilty when she's already struggling. Some of our friends have suggested I should give her some space and let her get back on her feet, but I can't shake the feeling that she's completely disregarding my side of things. So now I'm left feeling guilty for even asking and wondering if I crossed a line, but also frustrated that she's not taking any responsibility. My friends and I have a long-standing holiday tradition. Every year, we do a Secret Santa gift exchange and a cozy movie night. We always meet up at my friend Ben's place, where we can kick back in pajamas, munch on homemade snacks, open our gifts, and watch old Christmas movies. It's super casual, just a fun night of laughter and cheesy movies that we all look forward to. This year, however, I thought maybe it was time to give our tradition a little boost. We're all adults now with decent jobs, and I figured we could turn our usual low-key evening into a real event. Instead of cramming into Ben's small living room, I went ahead and booked a nice event space. A small, decorated banquet room at a local hotel with holiday lights and a little stage area for us to exchange gifts. I also thought it would be fun to have everyone dress up like a formal holiday party. I even arranged for a caterer to bring in some fancier appetizers and a bartender to serve holiday-themed cocktails. My idea was that we'd all get out of our comfort zones a bit, dress up, and make the night feel more like a real holiday celebration. I figured this would be an exciting surprise for everyone, a night to remember, not just another casual hangout. So, a week before the party, I sent out a group message with all the details, telling everyone to dress up and prepare for a classy holiday celebration. I thought they'd be thrilled, but almost immediately, the replies started coming in, and they weren't exactly what I expected. Ben replied, "Wait, what happened to movie night at my place? We always do it at mine." Another friend, Lily, said, "Formal dress code? I thought we were just wearing pajamas and bringing snacks." I reassured them, saying, "Guys, trust me, this will be amazing. It's going to be a step up from our usual movie night. I just wanted to make it more festive and special this year. Plus, you won't have to bring snacks. I've got it covered with catering." The response was lukewarm, to say the least. Ben messaged back, "I like hosting though. I kind of look forward to it. And I'm not sure I want to spend a bunch of money on a suit for one night." A few other friends chimed in, agreeing that they'd been looking forward to a cozy, laid-back night, not a fancy, dress-up party. Still, I thought they'd warm up to the idea once they saw the space and how much effort I'd put into making everything look amazing. So, on the day of the party, I showed up early to make sure everything was perfect. Candles, holiday lights, a cozy little tree with ornaments, and even a small pile of fake snow around the gift exchange area. I was honestly proud of how it turned out, but when my friends arrived, I could tell immediately that they weren't thrilled. Ben walked in and just stared, saying, "This is a lot." He was wearing a sweater instead of a suit, and Lily had on a holiday-themed onesie, looking completely out of place among the formal decor. They all shuffled in, looking around like they didn't know what to do. I tried to get everyone excited, saying, "Look, isn't this amazing? We got cocktails, catered food, and I even made a little area for the gift exchange." Lily looked around, frowning, and said, "But we usually watch a movie together. Where's the TV?" I had to explain that there wasn't a TV in the room because I thought we'd spend the evening chatting, taking photos, and enjoying the fancier atmosphere instead of just watching a movie. Ben shook his head, clearly frustrated. "But the movie night is like the main point of the whole thing. It's what we do every year. I don't get why you changed everything without even asking." I tried to lighten the mood, saying, "Come on, guys. We're stepping it up this year. Isn't it nice to do something a little different? We always do the same thing." I thought a classy holiday party would be fun for everyone. But they were clearly not into it. No one wanted to try the fancy appetizers, and the bartender I'd hired just stood there awkwardly because no one was ordering drinks. My friends ended up sitting around the room, making awkward small talk instead of laughing and relaxing like they usually would. It was like they were determined not to enjoy anything I'd planned. Finally, Lily looked at me and said, "Honestly, this feels like some corporate holiday event, not our usual movie night. We just wanted to hang out and be comfortable. This feels stiff." I was starting to get frustrated. I just wanted it to be special for everyone. I put a lot of effort into making it nice, and I thought you'd all appreciate something different. "We can do movie nights anytime." Ben shook his head and said, "But that's the whole point. We like the simplicity of movie night. It's relaxing. This just doesn't feel like us." After about an hour, everyone exchanged their Secret Santa gifts in record time, and instead of hanging around like we normally would, they started leaving. Ben even muttered that next year, he'd just handle the planning himself. It was a pretty awkward end to the night, and honestly, I was left feeling like all my effort was wasted. Now, everyone's been a bit distant, and a few friends have made little jokes about not wanting another formal event anytime soon. I thought I was doing something nice, but it's like they didn't appreciate any of it. I just wanted to elevate our tradition a bit and make it feel like a real holiday event instead of another casual hangout. So, AITA for trying to make our holiday party a little more festive. A few months ago, my best friend Mia and I got it in our heads to plan a joint weekend camping trip for our friend group. We've been talking about it forever, and after watching too many Instagram videos of people camping by crystal clear lakes and roasting marshmallows under the stars, we were sold. The plan was simple. We'd rent a couple of tents, pack up some food, bring portable speakers for music, and just get away from it all for a few days. Nothing fancy, just friends, fresh air, and fun. Mia and I decided to split up the planning so it wouldn't be too overwhelming. She's a total outdoorsy person and was super excited to handle the camping essentials: tents, sleeping bags, camping chairs, and any survival type stuff. I'd take care of the food, snacks, and entertainment, including planning a couple of games to play around the campfire. Mia even joked that she'd be the wilderness expert, and I'd be the morale booster, so we felt pretty set. I trusted her completely to know what we'd need to stay comfortable, since she'd been on a few camping trips before. Meanwhile, I'd make sure we wouldn't run out of food or things to do. In the weeks leading up, we kept up the hype with everyone in the group chat, sending funny memes about roughing it in the wild and throwing out suggestions for campfire songs and ghost stories. But when it came to actual prep, I got pretty busy. I managed to grab a bunch of snack foods, bags of chips, granola bars, and some hot dogs to cook over the fire, and figured that was enough. For entertainment, I tossed in a deck of cards and a Bluetooth speaker, thinking we could stream some music and that'd be plenty. I wasn't about to turn this into a big production. It was camping, after all. The weekend of the trip, I showed up at the campsite with all my food and fun supplies and was ready to just chill. But the second I saw Mia, I knew something was off. She was unloading her car, and her camping gear consisted of one two-person tent and 2 sleeping bags. There were 6 of us coming. She didn't even bring any camping chairs or a cooking stove, just a tiny stack of firewood she'd bought at a gas station on the way. Mia, where's the rest of the stuff?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. She looked at me like I was the one who didn't get it. "What do you mean? This is all we need. We're camping, roughing it, right?" I blinked. "You didn't bring any extra tents? Or even sleeping bags for everyone?" She shrugged. "I figured people could share and make do. It's part of the camping experience." I felt my stomach drop. "Mia, we have 6 people coming. We can't fit everyone in one small tent. And what about the chairs? We can't just sit in the dirt all weekend. She sighed, clearly getting irritated. Oh, come on. I thought you were going to bring some stuff too. And where's the actual food? Chips and granola bars aren't exactly meals, you know. At that point, our friends were arriving and immediately started exchanging confused looks as they realized the setup was, well, non-existent. People were asking where they were supposed to sleep, and one of our friends even offered to drive back to town to pick up extra supplies. I could feel the irritation building between Mia and me as we watched everyone's expressions shift from excitement to disappointment. Things only got worse as the night went on. We tried to set up some semblance of a campsite with what little we had, but we barely managed to start a fire, and everyone ended up huddled around it on the ground. The hot dogs I brought were basically our only meal, and people were trying to ration them to make them last, which was pathetic. The Bluetooth speaker died halfway through the evening because I'd forgotten to charge it fully, and the whole thing just felt like a cold, uncomfortable mess. At one point, Mia whispered to me, "I thought you'd take this more seriously. You brought the bare minimum for food and nothing for comfort." I felt my temper flare. Seriously? I thought you'd at least handle the camping basics. You're the outdoorsy one. You didn't even bring enough sleeping bags. She gave me a frustrated look. Well, maybe if you'd helped out a bit with the planning, we wouldn't be in this situation. We ended up bickering in hushed tones, both of us too stubborn to admit we dropped the ball. I felt embarrassed watching our friends try to make the best of it, but every time I thought about saying sorry, I'd remember her saying we were supposed to rough it, like that excused everything. In the end, we cut the trip short. Everyone agreed we'd be more comfortable back in town, and we packed up early the next morning with some awkward, forced laughter. I felt guilty, but I also couldn't help feeling like Mia hadn't taken her responsibilities seriously either. We barely spoke the entire drive back. Now, I can't stop wondering if I was the one who messed this up. My friend Ben and I have been close since college. He's the kind of guy who's been through a lot, but always seems to find his way through, and he has this easygoing, carefree vibe that draws people in. But beneath that, he's a bit of a hopeless romantic. He's been in a few serious relationships, and every time he falls hard and fast, sometimes without really getting to know the person first. Last year, he met this girl, Lisa, and within a few months, he was telling me she was the one. He was head over heels in love, convinced he'd found his future wife. I was happy for him. He looked genuinely happy, and she seemed sweet. They moved in together pretty quickly, which felt a bit fast to me, but I kept my thoughts to myself because I wanted to support him. After a few months, though, he started confiding in me about issues they were having. Lisa had a tendency to be possessive, constantly checking up on him, getting jealous whenever he'd go out with friends, even if he invited her to come along. She'd guilt-trip him into canceling plans, making him feel like he had to prove his loyalty. He'd brush it off as relationship stuff, but it seemed intense to me, and I could tell it was weighing on him. Still, he was determined to make it work, saying he was committed to Lisa and loved her. Whenever he'd tell me about their fights or her insecurities, I tried to be supportive without pushing my own opinions on him. But as the months went on, things seemed to get worse. He'd start our conversations exhausted, telling me about yet another argument, or how he'd spent all night apologizing to her for something trivial. I wanted to speak up, but I knew he was deeply in love with her, and I didn't want him to feel like I was judging her or his relationship. Then, one night, he showed up at my place, visibly upset. They'd had another huge argument, and he admitted that she'd threatened to leave if he didn't prove he was serious about her. I asked him what she meant by prove, and he hesitated before telling me that she wanted him to propose. Apparently, she'd been pushing him to get engaged, and when he tried to tell her he wanted to wait a bit longer, she'd accused him of wasting her time. I was floored. They'd been dating less than a year, and here she was giving him an ultimatum. I could see how stressed he was, how torn he felt, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Ben," I said carefully, "I know you love her, but are you sure this is what you want? It sounds like she's putting a lot of pressure on you, and that's not how it should be. If you're not ready, that's okay, and she should understand that." He looked at me, clearly hurt. "So, you think I'm just making a huge mistake?" "No, I'm not saying that," I replied quickly, feeling my heart race. "I just think that marriage is a big step, and it should be something you both want, not something you're pushed into. You've only known her a short time, and from what you've told me, it seems like there's a lot to work through first. He sighed, running his hands through his hair. I just don't want to lose her. She says this is how she knows I'm serious about her. Ben, if she truly loves you, she'll understand that you're serious about her without needing a ring right this minute, I said gently. You shouldn't have to rush into something as big as marriage just to prove your commitment. That's a huge decision, and it should be because you're both ready, not because one of you is giving an ultimatum. He shook his head, looking frustrated. I thought you'd understand. Maybe you just don't know what it's like to be in love like this. His words hit me hard. I'd been in a serious relationship before, and I thought I knew what he was going through, but I also knew I couldn't stand by and let him make a decision that seemed so heavily influenced by pressure instead of true readiness. Ben, I do understand, and that's why I'm saying this. Love is about compromise, yes, but it's also about respect and support. And if she respects you, she'll give you time. He looked away, his jaw tight. You know what? Maybe I'll figure this out on my own, he said, sounding hurt and defensive. Thanks for the advice, but I don't think you get it. And with that, he left. I sat there for a long time, feeling a mix of frustration, guilt, and sadness. I hadn't wanted to make him feel unsupported or judged, but I couldn't just stand by and let him make a decision I knew he wasn't ready for. The days that followed were tense between us. He stopped calling as often, and when we did talk, he kept things short, steering clear of any mention of Lisa. I missed the easy, open conversations we used to have, and I hated the distance that had grown between us. I thought about reaching out to apologize, but a part of me still believed I'd done the right thing by trying to protect him from rushing into something he wasn't ready for. Then, a few weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend that Ben had gone through with the proposal. Apparently, he'd given into the pressure and popped the question, and Lisa had said yes. Part of me wanted to be happy for him, but I couldn't shake the worry that he'd felt pushed into it, that he was doing this more out of fear than genuine readiness. I sent him a text congratulating him, and he replied with a short, polite thank you. I could tell he was still hurt, and it stung to think that my attempt to help might have cost me one of my closest friendships. I didn't want him to think I didn't believe in his happiness. I just didn't want him to make a decision he'd regret. Now, they're planning the wedding, and I'm still trying to figure out if I should say something again or if I should just let him live his life. I want to be there for him, to support him, but I'm afraid I'll only make things worse by voicing my concerns again. So now, I'm left wondering, AITA? This one starts with my mom, of all people. My mom, who's always been a force of nature, holding everything together with a calm strength that I used to think was unbreakable. She's a school teacher, the kind who remembers every student's name even years later. Always patient, always ready with advice or a warm meal or whatever we needed. But lately something fell off. She'd been quieter, even a little scattered, which was so unlike her. I chalked it up to her workload, maybe stress from some changes at school, but then I started noticing other things. She'd skip little things she used to love, like her Saturday morning yoga class or her book club. She'd cancel plans with friends, and I'd find her sitting alone with a cup of tea, just staring out the window. I didn't want to pry, but I could feel something shifting. Then, one afternoon, I stopped by her place to drop off some groceries she'd asked for. I figured I'd stay for a quick chat and maybe cheer her up a bit. While I was putting things away in the kitchen, I noticed an envelope on the counter. It was from a debt collection agency, stamped in bright red. My heart sank as I glanced down at the amount. She was months behind on her mortgage. My mom had always been careful with money. She'd raised me and my sister on a teacher's salary after my dad passed, budgeting every penny to make sure we were taken care of. The idea that she might be struggling, that she hadn't told anyone, that she'd just been carrying this burden alone had hit me hard. When she came back into the room, I tried to approach it gently. Hey, Mom, is everything okay? I saw the letter on the counter, and it looks like things might be tough right now. She immediately stiffened, her eyes narrowing slightly. Why are you looking at my mail? It wasn't intentional, Mom, I said quickly. It was just there and I got worried. I didn't mean to pry, but if things are getting hard, maybe I can help. You don't have to deal with this alone. Her face darkened. I don't need you meddling in my business, all right? I can handle my own finances. I know you can, but it doesn't mean you have to, I said softly, hoping she'd see where I was coming from. You've done so much for us. Always looked out for everyone else. Let me help you this time. I've been saving up, and maybe I could take care of a few bills or help with the mortgage for a bit. She shook her head, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. Oh, so now you think I'm helpless? You think I need my own child to fix my mistakes? No, Mom, it's not like that, I said, feeling a knot of frustration and hurt tightening in my chest. You're not helpless, and you haven't made any mistakes. Life just gets hard sometimes, and I just want to be there for you, the way you've always been there for me. But she turned away, arms crossed. Well, maybe I don't want your help, she said, her voice cold. I don't need my children worrying over me like I'm some fragile thing. I opened my mouth to respond, but I could see her mind was made up. She wouldn't look at me, her posture rigid, the space between us feeling like an invisible wall. I hadn't expected her to react like this. I thought she'd maybe feel relieved, even grateful, that she didn't have to keep carrying everything on her own. But instead, it seemed like my offer had only made her feel small, maybe even embarrassed. There was nothing left to say. Inadid, materin, alright, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. She didn't respond, didn't turn around. I grabbed my coat and left, the silence between us heavy and painful. On the drive home, I kept replaying it all in my head, wondering if I'd miscalculated entirely. I just wanted to help, to show her she wasn't alone. But maybe I'd underestimated how much her independence meant to her, how much she'd built her identity on being strong and self-sufficient. Maybe my idea of help felt more like an insult than support. Now I'm stuck with this ache in my chest, second-guessing everything, wondering if I only made things harder by trying to be there for her. Alright, here's how my attempt to plan a perfect date night for my girlfriend Leah ended up being not so perfect. Leah's been under a ton of pressure at work lately, and she's mentioned how overwhelmed she's been feeling, how she wishes she could just escape for a while. I took that as a hint, and since we hadn't had a real date night in a while, I decided I'd surprise her with one. I booked us a reservation at this upscale Italian restaurant she'd been talking about for months. Leah's a huge foodie, and she loves anything Italian, so I figured it would be perfect. I wanted her to have a night where she didn't have to think about anything. After dinner, I planned to take her to this little jazz lounge nearby, thinking we could just chill, listen to live music, and unwind. In my mind, this night would be the ideal escape she'd been craving, romantic, elegant, and nothing to stress about. I didn't tell her anything ahead of time, just asked her to be ready by 6 p.m. and to dress up. I could tell she was curious, but also a little hesitant. She's usually one who likes to know what's going on in advance, but I thought the surprise would add to the experience. The night arrives, and I pick her up. She looks amazing, and I'm feeling like the world's best boyfriend. I'm practically buzzing with excitement as we pull up to the restaurant, waiting for her reaction. But when we walk in, instead of looking thrilled, she seems tense. She gives me a tight smile and says, "This is nice, babe, but I thought we'd maybe do something more casual." I feel a little overdressed. I laugh it off, saying, "That's the whole point. I wanted us to have a special night, where you didn't have to worry about anything." But she just nods, not entirely convinced. We sit down, and I try to get her to relax, but she keeps glancing around, looking a bit uncomfortable. When the server brings over the menu, she takes one look at it, and I can tell she's hesitant about the options. I ask if she's okay, and she just says, "Yeah, I'm fine. I don't know if I'm in the mood for a big fancy dinner." That's when I realize I might have read things wrong. I try to lighten the mood by saying, "Well, it's just one night. Let's go all out. Don't worry about it. I'll handle everything." I start ordering for us, picking some of her favorite Italian dishes, hoping it'll show her how much thought I put into the night. But as the food arrives, she's picking at her meal, not really getting into it. Finally, I ask, "Are you sure you're okay? I thought this would be fun for you." She sighs, clearly struggling to keep up the polite front. "I know, and I appreciate it. It's just, I've been so stressed lately. I was kind of hoping for something more laid back. Maybe just, pizza and a movie at home." This is really thoughtful, but it feels a little overwhelming. Now I'm the one feeling awkward. I'd gone all out trying to create this relaxing, luxurious evening. And here she was, saying she'd have preferred a casual night in. But instead of saying that, I try to keep the mood going. Hey, don't worry about it. Let's just enjoy the night. You deserve something special, not just another night on the couch. But that just seemed to make things worse. She forced a smile and said, "Yeah, okay," but I could tell she wasn't really feeling it. The dinner dragged on, with her making polite small talk, but not really enjoying herself. By the time we left the restaurant, the whole romantic surprise was feeling more like a chore. I figured the jazz lounge would lighten things up. She loves music, and I thought maybe the more relaxed setting would put her at ease. But when we got there, she looked tired, and I could tell she wasn't in the mood to stay out late. She politely sat through a couple of songs, but after about 20 minutes, she leaned over and said, "I hate to say this, but I think I'd just rather go home. I'm exhausted." I tried not to show my disappointment. We ended up heading back, and the car ride was quiet. When we got home, she thanked me for the night, but didn't seem particularly thrilled. She said she appreciated the thought, but that she really just wanted some downtime after such a hectic week. I finally admitted I'd wanted to do something special for her, something that felt different from our usual routine. She nodded and said, "I get that, and it was really sweet of you. But sometimes what I need to feel special is just something simple. You know? Just a night where I don't have to put on a show or keep up with plans. I just wanted to be with you. No expectations." Now I'm left wondering if I completely misjudged what she wanted. I thought I was being thoughtful by putting so much effort into planning the night, but it turns out that all she really wanted was a low-key evening. Part of me feels like I messed up by assuming she'd want the same kind of special I imagined, instead of listening to what she really needed. AITA? About 3 months ago, my cousin Sophie reached out to me. We weren't super close, but we'd grown up together, and she'd always been like a sister to me. She'd been having a hard time, just lost her job, and had broken up with her boyfriend, who also happened to be her roommate. She sounded pretty desperate, and I could tell she was embarrassed to even ask for help. She said she just needed a place to stay for a month or two, until she found work and saved up for her own place. I could hear the stress in her voice, so I told her she could stay with me. Family helps family, right? I cleaned out the guest room, stocked up on a few extra groceries, and got everything ready so she'd feel comfortable. When Sophie arrived, she seemed grateful and promised she'd make herself useful, that she'd cook, clean, and be out of my hair as soon as possible. She thanked me over and over, saying she'd make it up to me someday. It felt like I was doing the right thing, and honestly, I was glad to be there for her. The first week went well. Sophie was friendly, cleaned up after herself, and even cooked a few meals. She'd go out every morning, saying she was hitting the pavement, looking for jobs. She'd come back in the evenings and tell me about all the places she'd applied to, or how she was networking and making new connections. I was genuinely happy for her, thinking she'd be back on her feet in no time. I even started helping her look for job listings online, printing out applications, and showing her local job boards. But as week 2 rolled around, her routine changed. She'd started sleeping in until noon, sometimes later, and I'd come home from work to find her in pajamas, scrolling on her phone or binge-watching TV. When I asked her about job hunting, she said she was networking from home and that everything's online these days. I thought it was odd, but I didn't want to seem too pushy, so I let it go, assuming she was figuring things out in her own way. Then the mess started creeping in. I'd come home to find piles of dishes in the sink, crumbs on the couch, and random clothes strewn around the bathroom and living room. One day I asked if she could tidy up a bit, and she gave me this big sigh, saying I was just about to get to it. But she never did, and each day, my place started feeling less like my home and more like hers. Week 3 arrived and things just kept getting worse. Sophie would go through groceries at an alarming rate, eating everything from my snacks to my meal preps. I'd come home, expecting to grab my leftovers for dinner, only to find the fridge empty. When I finally asked if she could pitch in for groceries, she laughed it off, saying, "Once I get my first paycheck, I'll go all out. Promise." But, of course, that paycheck didn't seem to be coming anytime soon. Things hit a tipping point when she started treating my place like her personal hangout spot. She'd invite friends over without asking, and I'd walk into the living room to find strangers lounging on my couch, eating my food, and taking over the TV. When I asked her to check with me before inviting people over, she rolled her eyes and said, "Geez, You're acting like this is a hotel or something. They're just friends. It was as if she couldn't see why I might want a heads up before random people showed up in my home. Then came the car incident. One morning, I woke up and couldn't find my car keys. I texted her, and she responded, "Oh, I borrowed your car for a quick errand. Be back soon." She returned 3 hours later with the gas tank nearly empty and the car covered in crumbs. When I asked her not to take my car without asking, she seemed genuinely annoyed, saying, "You know I don't have a car right now. I didn't think you'd mind. Isn't family supposed to share?" By the 5th week, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat her down and gently told her that I needed her to make a real plan for moving out and to start taking the job search seriously. She gave me this look like I just accused her of something horrible, and then launched into a rant about how some people just don't understand what it's like to struggle. She went on, saying not everyone's as lucky as you to have a good job and a place of their own, and that I was being selfish for not giving her more time. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to rush her out, but that I just needed her to show some effort and start contributing. She responded with, "Wow, so much for families sticking together." She stormed off to her room and didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. Since that conversation, Sophie has been distant and passive-aggressive. She still leaves messes everywhere, eats whatever she wants from the fridge, and barely looks for jobs. Every time we talk, she makes these snide comments like, "Guess some people just don't know what it's like to have to work for things, or it must be nice to have life all figured out." She's still using my things, inviting friends over, and generally acting like she's entitled to everything in my place. Part of me feels bad, wondering if maybe I should have been more patient or given her more time. But another part of me feels completely taken advantage of, like she's using me as a free ride without any intention of moving forward.